I'm back with your second class. Today's topic is vegetative propagation. Now all of you know vegetative propagation is a mode of asexual reproduction in plants. In this method, what would happen is that from a parental plant body, a somatic part would separate or detach. And as it comes in contact with moist soil or damp soil, it will give rise to a new plant. Now, this somatic part that separates from the parental body, this is going to be called as vegetative propagule. Alright, what is it going to be called as? Vegetative propagule. Now, in case of vegetative propagation, one thing is a very important point to be noted. That is, in the vegetative propagule, a particular substance or a particular structure is a prerequisite, and that is a bud. So all of you know from the morphology chapter that bud is an immature shoot that remains surrounded by a protective, immature cluster of leaves, isn't it? So this bud is going to be mandatorily present in the vegetative propagule. Only then it will be able to give rise to a new plant. Fine. So let us discuss the vegetative propagation process in details. Now, if we talk about vegetative propagation can be of two types. One is natural, another is artificial. Let us start with the natural process or mode of vegetative propagation. In natural mode of vegetative propagation, the plant parts like stem, root, leaf, any plant part which can contain a bud can participate in the process. Here naturally the plant parts bearing buds would be allowing the growth of new plants. Alright. So let's start with stem first. As because buds are mostly generated by stem, that's why let us start with stem first. Now, among the stem again, you know there are various types of stem. That is also discussed in details with you in class 11 morphology chapter. Now, there are basically three types of stem. That is underground stem, then there is subaerial stem, then there would be aerial stem, isn't it? So, let us take some important examples from each of the category. Starting with underground stem. So underground stems, if you remember, they are non-green parts of the plant that remains inside the ground, and they are going to possess nodes, internodes, and of course buds. Right? Now, in case of underground stem, there are certain basic characteristics that are to be followed. That is, underground stems are going to be swollen structures because they will be performing two functions mainly. First is perennation, okay, that is they will be helping the plant to survive unfavorable condition, and second is going to be food storage. They will be accumulating the food that would be required by the plant during the unfavorable condition. So all underground stem structures, they are going to possess these two characteristics. They will help in food storage and perennation, alright. So among the various underground stem, let us discuss the first one, that is tuber. Tuber, if you remember, the structure is spherical to oval, and these swollen structures, they are going to be present at the tip of underground stem branches. They are of course swollen due to accumulation of food. Now if you have a closer look to each of the tuber, you will find that the body of the tuber possesses certain minute depressions throughout. These minute depressions are known as eyes. These eyes, they contain the buds. So whenever it comes in contact with the moist soil or the conditions are favorable enough, the eyes or the buds that are present within, they would germinate and give rise to a new plant. Alright. Example all of you know already, that is potato. Another one is Jerusalem artichoke. The major difference is in the reserve food material. In case of potato, the food is stored in the form of starch, whereas in case of artichoke, it's inulin. Alright. Now, moving on to the next type, that is rhizome. Now again, rhizome is a underground non-green part of the plant, or a particularly underground stem, which is perennial in its growth. Now all of you know perennial means a plant structure that will show indefinite growth, or a particular structure that will show growth more than 2 years. So rhizomes are known for their perennial growth. Do remember this. It's a very, very important point about rhizome. So rhizomes are underground non-green structures which are going to be perennial in their growth pattern, and they also would possess nodes, internodes and buds. Alright. So the structures are going to be as such, irregular kind of in shape. They would have adventitious roots borne towards the lower end, and the upper end or the whole body of the structure will consist of nodes and internodes. Alright, so in this diagram, these are the nodes, whereas this gap between the two nodes is the internode. Alright, so from the nodes certain minute buds would arise. During favorable condition, they would germinate and give rise to new plants. Example, again all of you know, that's very common, is ginger. Also turmeric. Again, lotus. These are important examples. So next is bulb. Bulb again is a spherical to pyriform structure present inside the soil, and it's a reduced disc-like structure. Now this being the reduced disc-like structure, that's called the bulb. Below that remains adventitious roots. Now the most important part is present centrally, that is the terminal bud, and then the terminal bud would remain surrounded by storage leaves. Right? So now, in case of bulb, do remember, it's the terminal bud present at the center which is being protected and surrounded by concentrically arranged storage leaves. Alright? Axillary buds are also sometimes present, and they will be positioned here and there in the entire of the bulb. So now, example for this would be of course onion and garlic. Fine. So that is about the underground stem. Next we'll start with subaerial stem. So subaerial stems are certain weak stem. They are neither strong enough that they will stand upright, neither are they going to be remaining inside the soil. Rather, they are weak stem which will be trailing on the soil, and they will be taking the support of the ground to move. That's why we are calling them subaerial stem. Now among the subaerial stem, let's start with runner. runners are horizontally or prostrate, trailing elongated stems which will bear nodes and internodes. From each node above, there will be a cluster of leaves that would be arising, which is known as crown, whereas below it would remain adventitious roots. Alright, so this being the runner. From each aerial shoot, many runners can arise out, and then they will start moving in various different directions, spreading into the whole substratum. Hence, they are known as runners. Example will be grass. Alright, next. Sucker. Sucker is a structure that arises from one of the underground stem branch. Okay, this particular branch, it will be creeping horizontally in the ground for a while, and then it will go obliquely upwards. Alright, giving rise to a new plant. This is very commonly found in case of chrysanthemum. Also in mint or pineapple. Alright, so it is an underground node, or rather a particular lowermost node, from which a bud will germinate, and the bud will give rise to a horizontal stem, and that stem branch will grow creeping in the ground for a while and then come obliquely upwards, giving rise to a new plant. Okay, next. Offset. Offsets are like 1 internode long runners, okay, small runners, and they are mainly going to be found in rosette and aquatic plants or hydrophytes. Alright, so they are going to be appearing like this. Suppose this is the structure. This is a 1 internode long short runner or stem, and from above the node arises cluster of leaves. When leaves are going to be arranged in the form of rows or in the form of a flower in cluster, we call it rosette arrangement. Okay, so the leaves are going to be arranged like this. And from below the node there will be a cluster of adventitious roots that will arise. The whole plant body will remain afloat in water. So these are the leaves, these are adventitious roots, these are the leaves, these are the adventitious roots. So what we are left out with is stem, and this being your stem, that's called the offset. This kind of plant you have seen, of course, it is going to be very commonly found in Eichhornia and Pistia. Eichhornia and Pistia are ideal examples of offset. Eichhornia is also commonly known as water hyacinth, whereas Pistia is known as water lettuce. Now there is one important thing that I would like to discuss with you regarding water hyacinth. Water hyacinth is also known as terror of Bengal. Why? Because this plant, it was introduced from Europe to our country, and it was introduced why? Because it was supposed to decorate our ponds and lakes. Alright. Now because it's an alien species, that means it's not a species that naturally grows in our country. That's why it grew very rapidly. And as it grew very rapidly in the ponds and lakes, of course, it would drain all the oxygen from leading to the death of aquatic organisms and fish. And as all of you know, fish is a staple food of Bengal, and because of Eichhornia or water hyacinth, there was a huge, you can say, lack of fish or scarcity of fish that had started in Bengal. Because of that, we call water hyacinth or Eichhornia to be terror of Bengal. Alright? Fine. So now let's start with aerial stem. Now we know that each node in the aerial stem is going to bear at least one axillary bud. And then all of you know that one bud means one new plant, isn't it? So each segment of the aerial stem having at least one node can give rise to a new plant. Let us take the example of sugarcane. Like suppose this is sugarcane, this being a single node and it bears a single bud. Okay, this being the single bud. Now this bud under favorable condition would give rise to a new plant. Alright? Fine. So in that case, aerial stems can each segment, okay, each segment of the stem having a single node will be able to bear a new plant. Fine. Now, next is an important one that's called bulbils. This is a separate section. Bulbils are fleshy buds. They are fleshy buds. Now these fleshy buds are quite large, and when they come in contact with the soil, only then they can give rise to new plants. Okay? Like mostly these bulbils are going to be present in the axil of the leaf. Alright? But then in the most common example for bulbil that we choose is of agave. In agave, the bulbil is going to be present in the floral axis. So it will behave as a floral bud. So when this floral bud will fall off and it will come in contact with the soil, it will give rise to a new plant. Example, of course, I have told you one, that is agave. Other examples can be oxalis. Alright? Now, regarding stem, we have done our discussion. Let us move on to the other parts, that is leaf and root. Now, one thing I would like to mention here, that leaves and roots usually are not meant for bearing buds. So that's why very occasionally only certain plants which have exceptional way of bearing buds in the leaves or in their roots, only they will be able to participate in this vegetative propagation process. Like starting with the leaf. Certain plants like Bryophyllum, Kalanchoe, they would bear buds in their leaves. So when those buds will come in contact with moist soil, they will give rise to new plants. So the most common example we take is Bryophyllum. Then there is Kalanchoe. There can be Adiantum, etc. Adiantum, if you remember, we have discussed it in the plant kingdom chapter in class 11. It's called the walking fern, isn't it? Because it vegetatively propagates by its leaf tips. Alright? Regarding root, also in root, usually buds are absent. But then exceptionally in certain roots, buds may be present, and of course then they will participate in vegetative propagation. For example, dahlia. and sweet potato. Sweet potato, as it bears adventitious buds in its body or in its structure, that's why it can give rise to new plants, and hence we also call it to be a reproductive root, which we have discussed in class 11 morphology chapter, right? So that was about the natural modes of vegetative propagation. Now let us start with artificial modes of vegetative propagation. Artificial mode of vegetative propagation are certain man-made techniques. Like in the natural mode, you have seen that from the natural part of the plant body itself, certain of the parts which contains buds, they will give rise to new plants. But in artificial mode, what basically will happen is that artificially will take out a part of the plant body which contains buds and will induce that part to bear roots. As roots will arise from there, the buds will germinate and give rise to the shoot system. So it's entirely happening artificially, hence we call it artificial mode of vegetative propagation. Now artificial mode of vegetative propagation again consists of certain methods under it, like first let us start with cutting. In cutting, as the name itself suggests, a plant part would be cut out, okay? That plant part that has been cut out is going to be now dipped into dilute auxine solution, because auxine, as you know, it helps in promotion of roots. It induces root formation. So that plant part that will be cut out will be dipped into dilute auxine solution, which will induce root formation, and eventually the buds will germinate and give rise to a new plant. Alright? So in cuttings as well, there can be various parts of the plant that can be used, like the most common being stem cutting. In stem cutting, some 20 to 30 centimeter long plant like part, that is the stem, will be taken, and this stem has to be 1 year old, and then these pieces will be first, the lower end of the pieces will be dipped into auxine solution, mainly containing auxines like IBA or NAA, indole 3-butyric acid, naphthalene acetic acid. These are the main auxines that are used for root promotion. Now, once the roots will start to arise, the buds will germinate and give rise to a new plant. Alright? This can be done or employed in plants like China rose, rose, Duranta, citrus, etc. Alright? Now, moving into the next one, next form of artificial mode, that is layering. Layering is known as rooting cutting method. Rooting cutting method. Why is it called rooting cutting method? That's because in layering, a lowermost branch of the plant body would be taken up or would be chosen. A middle part of it would be defoliated, that means all the leaves will be removed, and once it is removed, that part would be introduced with a minute cut or a wound. This wounded part would be then pegged down into the soil and then waited for a few months, say. And as the time passes by, from that wounded part, certain adventitious roots would arise out. Alright? So what we are doing here is that we are cutting a part of the stem, okay, lowermost branch, so that it will be induced to form roots. So that's why we call it rooting cutting method. Alright? So that is all about layering. Alright. So do remember one thing then. In layering, mostly we are using short height plants. The plants who have their lowermost branches almost nearby to the soil, so that that plant or that particular branch can be easily cut and it can be easily introduced inside the soil. Alright. So there are various types of layering again. Let's discuss the first one, that is tip layering. In tip layering, suppose this is a plant, the aerial shoot of the plant, and this being the root. From the lowermost node, a branch that arises is going to be introduced into the soil in this slanting position. That means the basal part of the stem would be in a slanting position, but the tip of the stem would be upright. Alright? It would be of course introduced with a cut before introducing inside the soil, and then eventually the tip would start bearing roots, or the cutted part would start bearing roots. As the roots will start arising, this stem would obliquely move upwards and give rise to a new plant. You can then separate this whole branch from the parental body and you can grow it or you can plant it somewhere else as a new individual plant. Example for tip layering would be blackberry and of course raspberry. Blackberry and raspberry. Another very important type of layering is going to be called as air layering or goatee. So let us see what is air layering. Air layering or goatee. Now air layering is going to be performed in tropical or subtropical trees. So because it's a tree, of course the lowermost branch is not going to be nearby to the soil. So that's why the layering that would be done in a particular 1-year-old branch, which would remain suspended in the air. It will not have any connection with the soil. Hence we call it air layering. So let's see how it is done. Say this is a branch of the tree from which a ring from its bark will be removed. Alright? As the ring from the bark will be removed, so that means this branch has been injured, isn't it? Or a wound has been formed. Now this wound has to be plastered. Just like a bandage, we have to seal off this wound. Now this seal off is done by the help of grafting clay. So it is going to be a grafting clay that will be helpful in plastering this wounded part. Alright. Now what is grafting clay? Grafting clay is a mixture actually. It's a mixture of 1 part of cow dung, 1 part of finely cut hay, and 2 parts of clay. So 1:1:2 ratio. 1 part of cow dung, 1 part of finely cut hay, and 2 parts of clay. That's called grafting clay. Now, This grafting clay is again going to be wrapped up with a polythene bag as well, so that the moisture is not lost, as it is going to be mixed with water and also certain phytohormones like IAA, IBA or NAA. These are the root inducing hormones. So this particular thing is going to be kept for several months. Eventually, suppose this is the portion that was plastered. So eventually from below it, roots will start arising within a few months. As the root starts to arise, that means the grafting, or rather the air layering is ready. Alright. So now we can separate this branch from the parental body and we can grow it somewhere else as a new plant. Alright. So that is air layering. It can be easily done in plants like lemon, lychee, orange, China rose, etc. Alright? Fine. So this being another process, that's layering being completed. Now let us start with the third procedure, that's called grafting. Now grafting is a very interesting process. In grafting, two plants, they are going to be taken. One will contribute with its root system, another will contribute with its shoot system. So we will combine the two plants in a manner that they will unify and they will then start growing as a single plant or a composite plant. That's called grafting. Alright. So here mainly what will happen? Two plants will unify to form a composite plant. Alright. Now, the plant which will contribute with its root system, we will call it stalk. Whereas the plant that will contribute with its shoot system is going to be called as scion or graft. Do remember, scion is mostly going to be taken from a plant which has superior traits. Alright. Also, another very important thing about grafting is that grafting cannot be done in each and every type of plant. For grafting to happen successfully, the plant has to have cambium and the plant must possess eustele. Alright. Eustele means the vascular bundles containing xylem and phloem should remain in bundles, and in between there should be parenchymatous cells present. Isn't it? Like in case of dicots that you have learned in anatomy chapter. So it is to be done in plants with cambium and eustele. Plants with cambium and eustele can only participate. Alright. So this can be done, or this can be basically done successfully in plants like orange, apple, mango, lemon, etc. So after grafting, now let's start with micropropagation. Micropropagation is the most advanced way of artificial propagation. Here, a small section or a small tissue from the body of the plant would be taken and then it would be grown in specific laboratory conditions. Alright, so that each and every cell that was present in that tissue will give rise to one plantlet. So that means it is the most advanced way how very rapidly, in very less amount of time, multiple copies of a desired plant can be obtained. So we'll be discussing this process in details in strategies for enhancement of food production. So this was up till all the things that was related to vegetative propagation in plants. In the next class, we'll start with sexual reproduction.